I've discovered recently that our audience is actually politically adjacent. There are people who are interested in healing, left and right, internal healing. They might be interested in God. They might be interested in psychology. They're interested in healing themselves and their relationships. And those people, I believe, are politically activatable. They're just not interested in political wars.
Welcome to Making Peace Visible, the podcast about peace, conflict, and the media. I'm your host, Jamil Simon. This episode is part of a special series called Beyond Polarization. We're looking at what hyperpolarization is costing Americans, and we're looking for solutions, sector by sector. For this episode, our focus is new media. Let's start with a quick thought experiment. Think about an issue that you're passionate about. Now imagine sitting in a room with someone just as passionate as you, but on polar opposite side of that issue. Now imagine your conversation being recorded and will be streamed online. What do you think would happen in that room? Our first guest this episode is a content creator who brings Americans with deeply opposing views together and streams the conversations on YouTube. But he's flipping the script entirely. Larry Rosen is the host of The Enemies Project, an online docuseries where enemies, people who are polar opposites on an issue, participate in dialogue. Some of the pairs featured include a transgender woman and a right-wing gender fundamentalist, a black protester and a white police officer, and activists from both sides of the abortion debate. The Enemies Project launched in December 2024. Their videos get hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube and Instagram, and thousands of comments. Larry is an attorney and a mediator with over 2 decades of experience. He has a gift for facilitating discussions like these. Over the course of an hour, the shift in the way his guests feel about each other is dramatic and quite moving to watch. Larry Rosen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, where did the idea for the Enemies Project come from?
I was working on a book, which I plan to publish very soon as I have 500,000 followers, which might be pretty soon. I've been working on the book for about a decade. It's called The Enemy Dance. And within the enemy dance, people are doing this thing where they're going to their enemy and they're trying to really establish a dialogue. And in this region where people have been at war for millennia, in this fictional region called the Himbala. And I was telling a friend of mine about it. And I said, after I'm finished with the book and I publish the book, that's what I'm going to do, this thing called The Enemies Project. He's like, shut up. Stop with this stupid book already. Do that other thing. That's better. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, Larry, this is a new world. Media is how you'll affect people. And I thought about it. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. In addition, I had been at that time in Ohio, where my wife is from. And I'm from the Bay Area. I'm where we live in the Bay Area. And we were at dinner with the most incredibly beautiful people who are her extended family. We're laughing. We're having so much fun. They are all Trump-loving conservatives. They do these Trump trains on boats. And one of them says to me, and they're all listening, they're like, Larry, you seem so normal, but you live in Crazy Town. Like, how is it possible? What is it like living in Crazy Town? And I'm like, what are you talking about, Crazy Town? Like, you see that I'm an exception? I'm just like everyone around me. They're just like you. We eat at the same restaurants. We shop at the same stores. We watch the same TV. I mean, and we love to laugh and have fun together. Like, what else are we? And so it was so disturbing to me that they could have that idea of the people around me, and the people around me could have an idea of them as absolute lunatics, that I said, there's something fundamentally broken about the way we're perceiving each other. Everyone's wrong about who the other people are. And that's something I know how to address.
I mean, every single study found that people agree on many more issues than they realize they do.
You can go through the laundry list of issues, but I'll tell you that among the people that I speak with, because I speak with people on the left and right all the time, what's emerged for me recently is that the left and the right, particularly the far left and the far right, but the left and the right are both concerned about the exact same issue. They just blame each other for it. And that's wealth disparity. Both sides are really pissed off at billionaires and political corruption and think that democracy is ending.
Well, I mean, your experience and skill as a mediator is obvious to anyone who watches an Enemies Project video. Can you break down the process that you follow?
So basically, I have them at first fight. like they would on Jubilee. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a popular political program where people just yell at each other. You've probably seen clips of it. I have them do that to show that it doesn't work. Let them go at each other. Let's see if you can convince each other or convince each other's audience. And they can't. They end up disliking each other more. They've made zero progress because you never believe the facts of your enemy. You're in defensive mode. And then I switch to a different model where essentially I build rapport. I help them understand the challenging and the most beautiful episodes in each other's lives. And they start to really see not only the other person as a human being, but the other person is very similar to themselves, because the challenging and most beautiful experiences almost always have to do with human connection. And the most difficult are the ones where they've lost that connection, where somebody excluded them. And so they really start to see that we are fundamentally similar. And then we build back up into politics from what's deeply important to them into their political stances and what they're trying to see in the world. And now they can discuss politics in a profoundly connecting way. And ultimately, I have them shift roles. So I'm building perspective taking throughout this. I'm helping them get inside the other person. And ultimately, I let them really inside each other where they make the arguments on behalf of each other.
Well, I want to play an audio clip so our listeners can get a sense of the Enemies Project. This is from a conversation with a transgender woman named Eve and a MAGA gender fundamentalist named Nancy.
And let's just describe what a gender fundamentalist is, because I made that phrase up.
Right. It's new to me.
A gender fundamentalist is somebody who believes that there's only two genders, and she believes that Eve belongs in a mental institution. And so they're facing each other, this person who believes the other one belongs in a mental institution, and this woman who is fully transitioned.
Okay, so this clip is taken from just past the midpoint of the episode, and we're going to hear Larry's voice first.
What I'd like to ask you now, what you believe the other person or the other side does not understand about you fully, or your side. So who is willing to hear first, to listen?
I want to listen. I want to hear.
I want you to understand, as a trans woman, I just want to be normal. I don't want to come for anything else. I don't want to take anything away or make anybody do anything they don't want to do or don't feel comfortable with. Trans people do not need much. Just the same care and respect that you would give to any other human.
You said you don't need anything, but you need my approval.
No. I don't need your approval. And I don't need your acceptance, even. I would love it, but I ask for respect to exist in the same world and chase after the same goals.
You have all the rights to be loved, to exist, and nobody should make you feel less of a human.
That feels good to hear you say that.
I want to switch. What do you want Eve or someone like Eve, people on that side, to understand?
I want the trans community to understand my fear, my children, and anything that is going to deviate them from my role as a mom. The trans community has been very aggressive in terms of their advocacy, and where we're coming in as parents is staying away from the children.
I'm hearing that you are afraid that trans people are going to force a wedge in between you and your children.
Yes.
And force them to be something they're not.
I was so moved by this episode. What impressed me was the distance these two people traveled in this intense conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about this conversation, how it started and how it got to the point we just heard?
It started with them arguing, casting judgments and aspersions at each other, and making political points. When we shifted to their stories, they saw beautiful people in each other. So you're about halfway in where they had already shared their greatest hopes and their greatest pains. And they had really seen the other's suffering and the other's courage. At the end, Nancy, who says that she would drink out of the same glass as Eve, that she sees Eve as a beautiful person. And when she's playing Eve, Because remember, they play each other. She says, I am a good person. My parents brought me up to be a good person, and I am a good and loving person. And it's so emotional to see Nancy play even that way. Nancy's view of transgender people as humans may have changed. Her policy position hasn't. She still doesn't want transgender people near kids. She may be fundamentally mistaken about whether kids being near transgender people changes them to transgender. But what I will say is that Nancy and Eve started as a 1 and a 10 or a 2 and an 8 on the political dial. 2s and 8s can't function in society together. Now they're 4s and 6s. You can have a society with a 4 and a 6. And that is the goal.
Because that implies that people are seeing each other as human beings.
And they're willing to work with each other.
How do you find your guests and convince them to come on the show? I mean, you not only have two people who deeply disagree, having an in-depth conversation, but you bring them from all over the country to your studio in San Francisco to meet face-to-face on camera. And I know you record for several hours and then edit. All of that requires both courage, trust, and patience from your guests. How do you do it?
Personal rapport with the people. You know, most people are not going to be interested in airing anything about themselves publicly, unless it's in a non-vulnerable way, unless they're basically commenting on somebody else. At the beginning, it was particularly difficult because I had no track record, nothing I can show people. So I would go like on hikes, Bay Area hikes with Republicans. I would go to in the Bay Area, Democratic stuff, and I'd just talk to them as human beings, you know, tell them what I'm up to and how I diagnose the central problem with our society is our inability to cooperate, and that will be the downfall of humanity. And almost all of them agreed. Almost all Republicans agree with that. Almost all Republicans that I found were struck by the phrase, a divided people are a fallen people. And so some of them considered to being on the show, but also I got to know them. I interview people for many hours prior to them being on the show. And I let them know that they're safe with me, that I've got their back. And if there's anything in the recording that is embarrassing to them, I'll delete it. I'm wanting them to know that they're going to end up not being embarrassed by this, that it's going to serve them. And so at the beginning, it was hard, and it's still hard to find people, but it's gotten easier.
But do you have a particular criteria for selecting guests? I mean, I know you speak with each of them, like you said, before recording, but are there particular characteristics where you know someone will work?
Yeah, there are 3 characteristics, I would say. Passionate about their issue. They're not a centrist. They are passionate on one side. They have judgments of the other side. 2, they have some level of compassion in them. They are not a sociopath. They have to have compassion, even if just for their own side.
Right. No, that I would imagine that's a critical characteristic.
Critical. And then the last criteria is they must be compelling in some way. Compelling can be, you know, a very strong personality. Compelling can be some kind of bizarre belief that they're willing to defend. Compelling can be good looking.
You launched the Enemies Project about a year ago, and now you have over 87,000 subscribers. Most of your episodes have tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of views. And that's pretty impressive, especially considering the algorithms are set up to boost divisive narratives. And what you're doing is the opposite. Can you talk about how you built and continue to build an audience?
I will say that I think I misunderstood our audience to begin with. I thought our audience were people who were interested in politics. Those are the people who are watching political shows where they beat each other up. I've discovered recently that our audience is actually politically adjacent. There are people who are interested in healing, left and right, internal healing. They might be interested in God. They might be interested in psychology. They're interested in healing themselves and their relationships. And those people, I believe, are politically activatable. They're just not interested in political wars.
Aside from dealing with algorithms, one thing that can be challenging and encouraging about publishing online are the comments. What have you learned from the comments on your videos?
It's really interesting because I have this first 10 minutes where people fight it out. Half of the comments are about that stuff, even though that's not the point of the show. It's the show that didn't work. What's interesting to me is that a good percentage of the comments come from people who don't watch, who watch the first few minutes. That so many comments come from people who have only watched 5 minutes and then tune out speaks to kind of the discourse in our world. The people with the most vitriolic, uninformed opinions are the ones who feel comfortable commenting. I will also say, though, that there are tens of thousands of comments that have said, this is what we need in the world, or even this is the most powerful thing I've seen in my life. And that for me is deeply satisfying, obviously.
Well, I want to play another clip. This one is from an episode you did with Kevin, a retired police officer who's white, and Afeni, a Black community organizer. This clip is from the beginning of the episode.
Policing started as slave enforcement, slave catching, and now the police have been really used to abuse and I would say brutalize people of color, immigrants. There's a mass distrust of the system of policing.
First, I got to tell you, policing was not started as an arm of slavery. There is no way historically that police officers were put in place to chase down slaves. Policing goes back too far. Okay. And there's been slaves from the beginning of time.
In the context of America, yeah, the police were started as slave catchers.
But they weren't.
But they were.
They weren't. Absolutely not.
So W.E.B. Du Bois is wrong. Kelly Carter Jackson is wrong. Ta-Nehisi Coates is wrong.
Yeah, they're wrong.
Let's bring it to today. What is happening in our society today that you find deeply troubling about how the police are interacting with the public?
So we could start with Oscar Grant. We could go with George Floyd. He wasn't shot by the police, but he was certainly killed by them.
No, actually, the autopsy proves different. He was not killed by the cop. He was killed by a fentanyl overdose.
So, Larry, Kevin and Afeni are two people who don't just have different opinions. They disagree on the past, on history, both the long past and the recent past. How do you work with people who don't agree on facts?
No one will believe the facts of their enemy. Forget talking about facts, debating facts, if you want to convince someone of something. So that's the first principle. You first have to build rapport, which we do. The second piece is the way I help people inhabit the other person's view is not to have them adopt the other person's facts. It's to say, if I believed what you believe, it allows me to adopt your belief without believing it's actually true, without saying it's true. If I believed what you believe, how would I feel? That allows you to acknowledge the other person, to see that their reality is real and that makes an actual difference in their life.
It's real to them.
It's real to them. It doesn't mean that facts don't matter, but understand that motivated reasoning keeps us from believing an enemy's facts. For all of us, you're conservative, you're liberal, you think you got the truth, you won't believe your enemy's facts. It doesn't matter how they present it. You're not going to believe it because it doesn't conform, and you're going to figure out how it is that they're manipulating you, how it is that they're confused. If you no longer see them as an enemy, the motivation to do that drops. Clean up the motivation piece, and you clean up the factual analysis. Ultimately, almost all of my guests view the facts differently when they leave. Not at the beginning when they're arguing, when they leave, because they're not motivated anymore to deny the other person's facts. Now they're willing to listen and at least assess them. So I actually think it's easy to clean up facts if you don't address facts right away. But we do. And so people will absolutely view it as an attack and defend themselves against it. There's almost zero chance that people who are discussing facts will ever resolve anything. Now you might say, well, what good is that if we don't share a view of the world? It's much more likely that 4s and 6s will share a view of the world, will hear and explore things together. 1s and 10s can't. So I'm not saying facts don't matter. I'm saying if you go about it first, you're going to fail.
There's a critique of the Enemies Project that you actually brought up yourself on one of your episodes, that you're sane-washing people with extreme positions. For instance, you had a member of the far-right group, the Proud Boys, as a guest on one of your episodes. What's your response to this criticism?
I understand it. Like the goal of the Enemies Project is actually to bring people in from the political fringes because they're dangerous on both sides, from my perspective. Because in viewing the enemy, the other side as an enemy, they're willing to take extreme actions against them. So I understand the viewpoint that Matt, who is a Proud Boy, is dangerous because I'm building a bridge to Matt. I'm not just building a bridge back for him. I can walk Matt, and he did walk back to the center. That's my goal. Not to like the middle, but into the 80%. But what people are pointing out is that I might walk more people out to the fringes. I might platform. And I understand that. And I'm struggling right now because there is a fascist, self-declared fascist who I want to have on the show. He's a white supremacist. I've concluded that at the present time that I'm not going to have him on the show because I might walk more people back to him, out to him, than walk him back toward the center. And so it's true that there's a risk to platforming people and there's a benefit. And I can't claim always that the benefit exceeds the risk, but I think very deeply about it because I'm not doing this for any reason but for positive political change.
It's a challenge. There's no question about it. But there's been some discouraging research lately about the bridge building efforts in the United States. There's data that shows that these kinds of efforts only reach small groups of people. And when these people return to their own groups, the changes in their attitudes towards the other side begin to fade away. The reason we're talking to you for this episode is that you're making media. And in one sense, you found a way to scale bridge building efforts by filming these moving conversations, and you put them on YouTube where anyone can watch. Do you think the Enemies Project is having an impact on polarization through the eyes of your viewers?
On my viewers, yes. On the world, no. Right? And through the butterfly effect, potentially. I'll say two things. I do think media is highly leverageable. I can have one conversation viewed by 1.5 million people. You know, some of our Instagram views have been millions, 5 million people on it. Just lots and lots of people. One conversation. My own view is that this is a blip in the ocean until we have celebrities on the show, until I have Mark Ruffalo and Mel Gibson, until I have that level, which I'm going to this year. Not that I have these people lined up, but I have a dozen pairings that I want to do, and I'm going to work very hard to do them, because then it actually starts a cultural conversation. When you see two basically public enemies say at the end, you know, brother, I love you. I was totally, totally wrong about you. That actually does start a cultural conversation about who the fuck is doing this to us, because there's somebody doing this to us. And that is a conversation that I believe has political legs, that has media legs. But at the level I'm doing it presently, it's a beginning, it's a blip. And unless there's a tidal wave, no, I don't think these make a difference.
What happens after the participants in your videos return home? Do they keep in touch? Do they change their behavior? In other words, does the impact of the work endure?
You know, it's interesting because I keep in touch with them. And I'd say 80% have had a shift in the way they view the other side. But looking at their own media, you wouldn't think so, because a lot of them have their own social media, and they're not necessarily dialed down with respect to their own media. But when they speak to me about it, they still view the other person through the lens of their person is beautiful, and I understand the other side differently than I did. So they're willing to work in society with the other side to some extent. But there are such strong incentives in the media ecosystem for them to rejoin their people.
That's a huge problem. Thanks very much, Larry. I really enjoy sharing this with our audience.
Thanks for having me on.
We've just heard from Larry Rosen about what can happen when two people who see each other as enemies sit down face to face and are guided toward genuine understanding. Our next guest widens the lens, asking how we can cultivate that same spirit of curiosity across a broader culture. Monica Guzman is a journalist and public bridge builder. She's a host of A Braver Way, a podcast that looks for practical ways to bridge political divides in everyday life, and the author of I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. Much of Monica's bridge building work happens through online media, including podcasts and social media. We invited Monica back to ask what it takes to do this work on digital platforms that often reward conflict more than consensus. We wanted to know what bridge builders can and can't accomplish in that environment, and how political conversations online might be shifting. So, Monica, welcome back to Making Peace Visible. We're very happy to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
The last time we spoke, it was November 2024, right after the election. How do you think that the political conversation has shifted since then, looking especially at social media and online spaces?
On the one hand, people are more aware of the impacts of polarization. There's more and more research. There's influencers of all kinds, politicians even, who talk about this problem. So the consensus has been built that polarization is a problem. The forces that contribute to it are more and more clear, and the exhaustion people feel in the face of it is also becoming very clear. So that's hopeful. That's great. On the other hand, our politics has not gotten any braver. I think that it continues to fall into reactionary cycles, a lot of retribution, a lot of grievance on all sides, and it makes communication all the harder. At the same time, there's an administration that is pushing the boundaries of what administrations have done in the past. There's a heightened level of anxiety if you happen to be someone who doesn't support this particular administration. This one is very active, very accelerated, really pushing the boundaries of things. And so that just destabilizes enough of what's under all of us that it just makes the ground feel shaky.
Curiosity is a key concept in your work and in your practice. Why start with curiosity? Was there a moment in your life when you realized that curiosity was an entryway into bridging divides?
Curiosity is the great unmasker of our own assumptions. And right now, the divisions in our society push us toward making so many assumptions, particularly about people and ideas that scare us or make us anxious. There wasn't necessarily a moment in my life, but there were many, many moments in my professional work as a journalist where I came face to face with the power of my own assumptions. I would get an assignment and I would go and interview the person I was supposed to interview, and I would have the story in my head already written. I just needed their quote. But once they opened their mouth and I asked questions because it was my job, I realized how easy it is to get people wrong. Those were some of my most formative experiences as a young journalist, was recognizing the harm that can come when I get people wrong. And I just realized over and over again that if we don't ask questions and we unintentionally believe what we've imagined, we can really hurt each other and we can blind ourselves to what's real.
One thing I'm curious about, are you seeing more content creators like yourself who try to respond to this situation by presenting both sides of an issue with a little curiosity?
Yeah, I am really heartened to see the work of folks like Isaac Saul at Tangle News, Anafi Wahed at The Flip Side. There's also Ground News. There's All Sides. There's folks in media trying to innovate and do something that gets us past the ideological silos that media has settled into. You just had Larry Rosen on, and Larry's show, The Enemies Project, I mean, it's one of the greatest examples of the conversations we need more of. When people see the people he brings together and how he does it, and he pauses in those videos to explain, here's what's just happened in the dynamic. Can you detect that? Can you see that? I'm so encouraged by folks that are bringing what used to be invisible and making it visible and letting people know you can have really tough conversations well. You don't see it on the 24-hour news, but let's show it to you here.
For listeners who aren't familiar with your podcast, could you briefly introduce A Braver Way?
A Braver Way is a podcast that's about how to meet division with strength. So our mission is to help people stay strong, grounded, and engaged somehow in dangerously divided times. That's a different formula for every listener, and we try to bring the kinds of stories and conversations and practical tools that people can listen for and say, I need that. I need that in my relationship with my sister. I need that in my conversations with folks in my school. You know, whatever it happens to be.
I can use that.
Exactly. It's always been about equipping people. You know, we're not here to intellectually explore, exclusively, like that can be fun, But we don't want these to be kind of castles in the sky, ideas that are abstract and over there and for other people. This is about every single one of our lives. I think at the heart of A Braver Way is this conviction that it really does start with all of us. While we are tempted to wait for folks in politics and media to figure this out for us, that's not the way democracy works. The core unit of democracy is two people talking to each other. And if we can't do that, we will lose what holds us together.
Absolutely. Well, you restarted your successful podcast in June after a long break. And in the first episode of the new season, you asked questions like, with everything going on in this country, is more talk with the other side really what we need right now? And I mean, there's another way of looking at it, or at least another question is, what difference does bridge building make? I mean, how do you answer that question?
There's many ways to answer that question. One that came to mind is something that we ended up digging into on our second new episode with Greg Lukianoff, who's the head of a preeminent free speech organization, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Communication is the anti-violence. This is the tool that we have, that so many other creatures on this planet don't really well. We have the means of getting our meaning out of us, of articulating our concerns to others. And we have evolved to be social creatures. We survive together. We thrive together. We also compete with other tribes. And so there's this division and community, right? Isolation and cooperation. And that's always been a tension in human life. But the second that we abandon communication that teaches us what's really going on in the hearts and minds of other people, we're lost. We're lost. We will be lost in the stories that our tribes tell that arrive to us most easily thanks to the way our communications landscape is structured, the way our personal technology is always in our pocket, right there, first thing we see, last thing we see before going to bed. We really can get lost in our own siloed versions of what this world is and who else is in it and what they think of us.
How deeply do you engage on social media? I mean, do you make a point of swapping messages with people who disagree with you, or how do you handle that?
Ooh, yeah, those are two very different questions. Do I make a point of swapping messages with people who disagree with me on social media? That's less and less true. I have found that the best technology for disagreement is in-person communication. That's where I try to do the most of my disagreement. I do regular phone calls and Zoom calls with people who disagree with me politically, like actually, literally. It's almost like a hygiene for me.
That's an interesting way to describe it.
It keeps me honest with the world. Like, it feels like if it's been too long, it's like I haven't taken a shower. You know, I need to check all the skunk that's building up in me, a lot of which might be totally valid. And even still, even if my fears and my judgments are totally valid, it's in conversation with someone who disagrees with me that I can truly understand that, and I can clear the cobwebs of my assumptions and get to, oh, you know what? I really do care about this. And now I know that I really care about this. And now I have to decide, am I going to do something about it? It clarifies my action. You know, do I do that on social media? No, I used to. I used to. When they happen, when disagreements spark on social media, then I go up what I call the ladder of containment. So if it's on a comment thread and the option is for me to respond on a public comment thread, that's putting it on display, and people tend to perform their perspectives instead of explore them. So what I'll do is I'll try to get on a direct message with that person, and I'll answer via direct message. That goes up a step on the ladder of containment. It improves the success rate, if you will, of that conversation being productive.
That's a really interesting strategy. As you know, people who are listening to this conversation have just heard my interview with Larry Rosen. And there's no doubt that Larry's making an impact on his platform. His emotionally driven sessions are recorded in an intimate setting with just two individuals and himself as a mediator. You know, many of his guests have their own social media following, and he discovered something a little bit disheartening, is that on his show, the guests go through this transformation in their attitudes toward their so-called enemy, but afterwards they rarely reflect that shift, that receptiveness on their own social media platforms.
You said they rarely reflect that shift on their own social media platforms.
Yeah, so they're not sharing what they went through. And I was curious, I don't know, maybe it's an incentive problem, what incentive is there for content creators to tell their followers, I changed my mind,
Ooh, yeah. What a great point. Not much. I mean, we talked about identities, and identities tend to get really firmly established in social media profiles. You begin to accumulate followers who expect the same from you day after day. It's very difficult to change. I remember in the early days of social media, the word was brand, build your personal brand. There's not much room in a personal brand for personal growth, unless that's part of your brand. But if it isn't, and you've given people comfort in a certain way, then they will tug you and pull you to stay the same for them, to continue to give them the same things. So it creates this parasocial relationship, which there's been a lot of great writing about, but it also encourages the person behind the profile to form themselves into something that gives people what they seem to want, as filtered through algorithms, that obviously filter for intensity and emotional and sometimes outrage and things like this. And it just becomes a little harder to be a person who feels free and fluid and able to say things like, hey, I just went through this experience and here's what I learned that actually kind of butts heads a little bit with what you've seen from me. That takes a lot of effort. Some people can do it, but I think in order to do it, you have to feel like you have a home on the other side. So if something about you is changing, will you be welcomed?
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, will you be welcomed? And that comes from incredible research by David McRaney, who wrote a book called How Minds Change, and that's changed my mind about how minds change.
When we talk to peace builders, they often say it's the biggest arguments that they have are with their own side.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the toughest arguments.
Those are the toughest ones, right?
Yeah. The other thing
Yeah.
that social media does is it creates this stage where it's brave to attack the other side, but it's not brave to attack the other side anymore. That's what's expected. What becomes braver is to criticize your own side for behavior that might undermine your goals, that undermines a better society. That's really hard.
Well, has being known as a bridge builder made it hard to say what you actually believe? I mean, is there something you've held back because it might cost you credibility? I mean, this is in the same domain here.
I ask myself this question all the time. My first book came out in, my only book, I don't know why I said first. Wishful thinking,
sure
I'd like to write a second book.
I'm sure it's
Bit by
the first of many.
When I was writing my book, I was wrestling very hard with that because I was formed as a journalist by the journalism institution to not be open about my views if that might compromise the trust an audience has in me. So that was really important. What I then learned after I told my own story and was more open about my political views in my book, but also was extremely curious about the other side and balanced all the examples just as much as I possibly could, is that there is a trust that is gleaned from somebody who is both honest about what they believe and goes out of their way to really try to understand other views. So that's kind of my identity. I feel like I am living up to my values when I do that. So can be open about my views, but always accompanied by extreme curiosity about the other side. Now, that's easier said than done. Obviously when I turn on the mic and I'm in a podcast environment that's a little structured, I can kind of prime myself for that in a million ways. And I know I'm kind of on display. But if you see me and my mom, well, some of the practices will go out the window. Like my parents are actually visiting me right now. And when they visit, we all almost always fall into some fun, sometimes not so fun, political disagreement. I expect that to happen. They just arrived yesterday, so we're just warming up.
Right.
But, would I air those conversations? Probably not, unless I thought that they could do some good.
I want to ask you this. You're Mexican American, and one thing we've noticed, bridge builders in the U.S. have in common, they tend to be white and born in America, at least the ones we've heard about. First of all, I want to ask you, is that an accurate description, given your experience in the field?
Interesting. I don't know. I think of my good friends Manu Meal and John Wood Jr. John Wood Jr. is Black, Manu Meal's Indian, and I just work with them, all the time. So I don't know. I don't know if it's true. I do think that there are some patterns, though.
But were you at the Braver Angels convention?
Definitely mostly white.
Mostly white.
Can't deny it. Mostly older people, mostly white, which isn't to say that there weren't lots of young people and lots of people of color. But yeah, there are demographic patterns. I think that's true.
Why do you think that is?
Boy, yeah, that's kind of like put on the demography hat and speculate, I suppose, a bit. Well, I mean, one pattern that emerges is, let's see, often to be a bridge builder, you have to have a little more time, which is why I think a lot of older folks join in the kind of the volunteer corps. And then it appears to be true that it's easier for bridge building as a practice to reach, the parts of the two political sides that are a little bit closer to the center. It's harder to reach all the way to the wings. Not impossible, and I know plenty of folks from those places, but that's a little tougher. I don't know how that necessarily lines up with racial, dynamics.
Well, also, I imagine that people of color and immigrants or anyone who's really marginalized in one way would be wary of bridge building work. I mean, I'm talking about people for whom the major political disagreements we have aren't just a matter of debate. Their actual lives may be affected, especially nowadays. That said, how can bridge building be more inclusive?
How can bridge building be more inclusive? It's inherently difficult when somebody is feeling marginalized, like you said, to want to, what does that mean? What does bridge building look like? I think when you're in that position is a better question. Bridge building is not the same thing for all people in all positions. It can be very, very different.
Could be threatening.
Yeah, you don't have as many tools at your disposal. It can feel threatening, but I think that's a challenge to overcome. There are incredible examples of people who held all the marginalized identities you can think of, who were able to have the biggest impact because they took that step anyway. So what I think happens is that it becomes harder and it takes more courage. But I think it can be more effective. When you carry an experience that is not seen, then you will feel like you're in danger if you converse with other people. Most of the time in this society, you're not actually in physical danger at all. And I know that's a radical statement, but it's true. You will feel the trauma of your, memories, of the stories you've picked up, of the scripts that you've internalized. When I say this, people will think this, and then they will hurt me or they won't want me to exist. All of that is real in your mind and in your heart. But the challenge is to go and put it to the test. You don't put it to the test by talking to a Nazi. You put it to the test by finding someone who is a much more low risk difference, right? And that's the transformation, is even people in the most marginalized, oppressed feeling sorts of positions, when they find their edge and meet somebody at their edge, somebody who doesn't feel too dangerous, but just a little bit risky, and then you have that conversation, you start to kind of tear down some of the things that are inspiring undue fear in all of us that is keeping us from coming together.
Which are often assumptions.
Often assumptions. So you'll just push the edge bit by bit by bit. That's the way to do it. So I do think it's a mistake to think, bridge building wants all of us to just hop into conversation with the scariest people we can imagine. That's unrealistic. That's not how this works. It's everyone find their edge and push it. We only build our capacity at the edge of our capacity, right? If we stay where we're comfortable, nothing changes.
Making Peace Visible is a member of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts united around the goal of helping listeners understand what's broken in our democracy and how people are working together to fix it. Here's another Democracy Group podcast that you might like.
Hey everyone, my name is Jenna Spinelli, and I host and produce a podcast called Democracy Works. It's a collaboration between the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State and WPSU, Central Pennsylvania's NPR station. If you enjoy this podcast, I think you'll like our show too. Every episode examines a different aspect of what it means to live in a democracy. Sometimes it's big picture issues like neoliberalism or demagoguery, and other times it's more on the ground topics like ranked choice voting and how local news deserts are democracy deserts too. Some of our previous guests include Jonathan Haidt, Andrew Sullivan, and even Wynton Marsalis. So I hope you'll check out Democracy Works. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
What part of your work do the algorithms reward? I mean, is it the same part you think is most valuable?
No. God, no.
That was a quick answer, yeah.
Yeah, no. No, the algorithms seem to be against so much of the work all the time, and I wrestle with that. But what I remind myself is that the algorithms are really reflective of our baseline psychology. They just are. So in our 4th episode of A Braver Way, I had on a neuroscientist, Axel Bouchon, who's done incredible viral experiments on social media. His account is Matter Neuroscience, so go check it out. It's really cool. But he kind of taught me something I didn't realize, which is that our oldest emotions, anger, fear, are buried deep within our skulls. They're the central parts of the brain. The newest parts of the brain on the outside have things like gratitude and compassion. These kinds of emotions take a little more work. They're less innate to us. We have to shift to them. But when we do, we become fully human. When we shift from fear to compassion, just for a moment, just to see what changes, boy, we're being human. When we stay in anger and fear, we stay in our animal brain, all the way at the center. So unfortunately, I think social media, it gets to that animal brain real well.
It does, yeah.
It does. And
it
I think
hijacks our amygdalas.
Exactly. We just have to work with that. And so what I think happens is the same thing, is on social media, it takes more work to create the kind of content that actually tugs at people's compassion, tugs at their gratitude. And that part of it is rewarded. So my social media feed, I'm on Instagram mostly. I've followed the kinds of accounts, and given Instagram all kinds of data about what I want. And I see some just incredible insights summed up on a slide and flying. Or some thinker or some person telling a story and just sharing a piece of something that people see, and it like makes them tear up because they recognize something beautiful in it, and boom, and it's just everywhere. It's harder for those things to travel, and it's harder to make those things, I think. So I think we're fighting an uphill battle on social media, but only because we're fighting the same uphill battle in our own brains. So that's one way that I try to convince myself, like, don't just run away from social media. Social media is us. It is us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it does reflect us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you identify as a liberal. What conversations happening on conservative online media do you think your fellow liberals are missing?
I am personally very fascinated as a liberal who has some thoughts about what's going on right now in our government, that I don't like. It's very interesting to me to go to a place like Real Clear Politics. I love going to Real Clear Politics because it's a wonderful site for curating really interesting commentary on the right. And I'll go through and I'll read from people who are really actually excited and optimistic about the exact same things that are bringing me down. And so those conversations are fascinating for liberals to take a look at, because I just think it's important to, like, can you spend like 5 seconds considering it from over here? Because if you do, like, some things start to turn and twist.
There's some real value in that.
Right? Like, I don't change my mind on the major conclusions at all, but I do change my mind on the rationality of these things I don't like. And I go, wait a minute, if I were over there, if I were like this, I would like them, and I understand that.
Well, you're a mother of a teenager and a preteen. What are your kids seeing on their social feeds when it comes to politics, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, they don't have social feeds. My son, who turned 14 yesterday, is hugely against social media. He'll tell anyone who'll listen, like, social media sucks. He'll make fun of it and he hates it. But boy, is he good at the group text. He and my 11-year-old daughter have all of these group texts. So that's their social feed. And I think that's great. It's just the people they know. It's just people in their classrooms. So it's really changing. I get the very strong sense from the Generation Alpha coming up that they're going to have a very different relationship with social media. And mostly they just want to have relationships with each other.
If our listeners want more bridge builders in their information diet, are there any other creators you would want to shout out?
Ooh. I don't follow as many of the giant influencers as I do kind of the organizations that I know are making a difference. I mentioned Manu Meal. He's with Bridge USA. Add Bridge USA to your feed. Add Matter Neuroscience to your feed. Add Builders to your feed. There's some great stuff coming down from them.
Yeah, well, those are good people. Monica, I can't thank you enough. I mean, it's really a pleasure to talk to you and hear your insights. Your antenna is very strong.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that might still be true for now.
It's great to hear, and I'm glad we can share these ideas with our listeners. So good luck on your new series, and thanks very much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You can find Monica Guzman's podcast, The Braver Way, anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. You can find Monica on Instagram at Moni Guzman. That's M-O-N-I, Guzman, G-U-Z-M-A-N. You can find Larry Rosen's work on YouTube and Instagram at The Enemies Project. If you like what we're doing, support the show at makingpeacevisible.org/donate. Your donation is tax deductible and you can give once or set up a recurring gift. You can also support MPV by leaving a rating, review, or a comment wherever you're listening. It really helps people find us. Coming up next in our Beyond Polarization series, we look at how college professors are helping students navigate fear and anger and reckon with the past. That's just in time for back to school on September 1st.